Welcome to another edition of Exotic Gardening UK Yorkshire Kris Weekly. Well, after the week of absolutely gorgeous sunny weather, some nice warm temperatures, albeit some frosty nights, we've got a very cloudy week ahead, much colder, and today, Sunday, it's actually hailing at the moment. It's not very nice. But the nights are getting less frozen going forward, so we'll still get the odd frost going forward, but we shouldn't get any real cold looking at the forecast for the next few weeks in April. And one of the last remaining jobs that I'm going to do in terms of removing winter coverage is the straw beds. And if you remember, back in November I laid straw down lots of beds to cover over some of the cannas, the begonias in there, but mainly the colocasias. Now the pink China colocasia that's mainly under this straw is hardy. I've left several in the garden completely unprotected and they're totally fine, but as an insurance policy and to cover the other plants, I do put a straw bed down. Now is the time to remove it. You could wait a few more weeks, but I just want to see how they're doing underneath. So if I just take off the straw, yes, it's a bit wet, but as well as protecting the plants underneath, what it's also doing, it's keeping down the weeds as well, because it's a big impenetrable barrier. It gets rid of all the light. So if you look here, what we've got, you can see we've actually got the pink Chinas nice and firm, loads of runners, loads of plants actually all here. And these, now they're exposed to the light, will start growing away, new leaves will form from the top here, and I have literally hundreds and hundreds of plants, and all the other plants surrounding them, so like I said, the dahlias, etc., they have been protected by the straw as well, and there's no weeds really growing in this area. I need to go around the rest of the garden, take off the rest of the straw, and then I'll show you what everything looks like. Also, coming up in this week's edition of Exotic Gardening UK. Answering your questions that you sent me over the last week, I'll be sowing some very rare seeds and hoping that I get them to germinate, and I'll also be clearing parts of the garden. Now I've removed pretty much all the straw from the beds, and as you can see, standing to attention are all the colocasia pink Chinas that have survived the winter nicely, and within a couple of weeks these will have their first leaves of the season, and as long as we don't get any late frost, they will grow rapidly to produce nice plants in summer. And even if we do get a late frost, it won't kill them, it'll just damage that leaf and it'll continue to push leaves all the way throughout the season. The bigger leaves will be produced in summer when it's warm nights as well as warm days, and with some feed of poultry manure, a bit of milk will grow or something like that, they'll get bigger and bigger leaves. Now each week I get lots of questions asked either on Messenger, Facebook, on YouTube itself, or sometimes as email. I try to answer as many questions as possible, but I do miss some, so I do apologise for that. But some of the questions I've had this week, I thought I would actually answer them in this week's episode. So here are some of the questions I've had this week and the answers that I'm giving. So one question I've had this week is about the Chemaerops humilis, the European fan palm. And often this is a very shrubby plant with many stems and lots of offshoots from the base. And that is because it mainly grows really as a shrub with many stems coming from the ground rather than one stem. But you can, on most specimens, remove the side shoots, as I have done with this one. And as you can see, we've got one big thick stem which is grown pretty much straight up, and at the sides, right at the base, you can see some little offshoots. And what I do annually is cut these off. So at the base I'll literally get a saw and I'll just snap off and cut through these stems down here, and then all the energy goes into this main trunk and growth, and it grows upright like this. And this you can do with most Chemaerops humilis. Some seem to just have loads of stems and will continually grow lots of stems, so it's best to leave that as a shrub. But if you want a one trunk one, There's a form called Chemops arborescens, or you can do as I have done with this specimen and just continually remove the side shoots around the dominant trunk. Now you can also try and remove them, like dig them up and get a bit of root and propagate that way, but it's very rare that works, mainly because it's hard to get roots off the side shoots, because most of the food and energy on the side shoots is coming through the main trunk and the main roots of the main trunk. But sometimes you do get roots around the side and you can separate them that way, but I wouldn't bother really. You can either pick them up as very small plants pretty cheaply in nurseries and garden centres when they're open, or you can actually grow them from seed as well. They're very slow to propagate from side shoots if you only get a tiny bit of root. So that's Chemops humilis, side shoots and growth. Another of the viewers' questions I've had over the last few days is, should I cut straight across my Jubaea like I showed with the onset bananas in my last episode? Well, not really. Basically, it is all tatty this, and you definitely can cut off these side bits if you want. There's no need to cut completely across the top, because what you should notice, hopefully by now, is you've got new growth coming out the top and this leaf will be unfurling. What you can do is take off the dead bits at the top, and if the leaf is stuck and trapped by the dead parts, you can remove the dead parts like this. But what you will notice over the next week or a month or so is you might get a late frost and the new emerging leaf might blacken off, but that's not the end of the world. It's only temporary damage. New leaves will always unfurl from the centre. So yeah, definitely tidy up all the sides, but there's no need to cut straight across on Jubaea. Now another question I've had this week is, should I unwrap my tree ferns, Dicksonia antarctica? Well, we've had a very mild winter, and as you can see, mine have kept all their fronds. But if you did wrap yours up, either in straw or fleece, then you can definitely take all that off. There's no need for that now, because they're pretty hardy, down to at least -5, and we're not going to get those temperatures in 99% of the UK now. Now I do keep straw in the top of these, so in here I do have straw, and I do at the moment keep checking on that every few days, just going in there, removing it, seeing if I can see the new leaves coming out, and then just putting it back in. I will keep the straw there as long as possible, because it will protect the unfurling croziers, the new leaves that come out the top, because they are very delicate when they are freshly emerging, and even a slight frost will blacken them off. So I'll keep this here as long as possible, and as it's getting drier, last week's been dry, then these might need watering now. If you've used straw, you can easily see if they're moist underneath still, but if you use fleece in the top of these, it might be that they're very dry in the top and you might want to give them a little rainwater. So yes, if you wrap them up completely, definitely unwrap them. If you put straw or a bit of fleece at the top, I'd keep that there a little while longer until the leaves are completely starting to emerge and push out the straw and fleece. Now if you're lucky enough to have a Trachycarpus palm set seed last year, it'll have ripened over winter and you'll have these bluey purple berries basically. And if you don't want a million plants underneath your palm tree, it's best really to cut these off and dispose of them. Of course, you can definitely just pick these off, put them into some pots and grow them away, and you'll have literally thousands of plants. And that's very easy to do, Trachycarpus fortunei, because they do grow pretty well, especially when they're fresh. Now another type of palm tree that's very difficult to get hold of is Juania australis, and luckily I managed to get some seeds before Christmas and try to germinate them, and they take a lot longer to germinate on average. So coming up, I'm just going to show you how I managed to germinate, or attempt to germinate, the Juania australis seeds. So sowing palm tree seeds, here are the seeds or the berries of quite a rare palm tree, Juania australis, from Chile, in the islands of Chile. And this, basically, I'm going to show you in this video the process of germinating palm tree seeds, including this Juania australis. So as you can see, it's still got a bit of flesh on, a bit of pulp here, as you can see there. The orangey flesh and some sort of rubbed off. So what I'm going to do with these quite large seeds, about 1.5 centimetres across, is I'm going to soak them in water for a day or so. Just keep it sort of changed a couple of times a day, and then we'll move on to the next stage of sowing these seeds. So here are the seeds. I've been soaking in this bag of water for just over a day now, and the flesh will have come really loose off the seeds, so I'll be able to rub that off and on to the next stage of germinating the palm seeds. So I'm just going to drain the water from the seeds, and then you can see the orange flesh on them. I'm just going to take this off. I'm going to use my fingers and just sort of peel it off. Now some people might find that the flesh might give them irritation on the skin, so you might want to wear some latex gloves, but if you're happy to have a go, just scrape it off with your nails and it'll come off nice and easy. Now it's been soaking for just over a day. So that's all the flesh that I've removed from the Juania australis palm seeds. Now something I like to use when germinating seeds that take a long time is cinnamon. And the reason I like to use cinnamon is it stops the damping off disease, so it stops fungal infection of the seeds, so it helps prevent it at least, and it also promotes rooting as well. So it's a very useful natural way to make sure that seeds don't get attacked by fungus and has a really good start to rooting as well. And you can get cinnamon powder, or you can get cinnamon sticks, which are actually different species of the cinnamon plant. So I'm going to grind this down. So I've got my cinnamon stick here. I'm just going to pour one into this container. Not all of them in this case, just want one, so I'll put the other two back. And then I'm just going to grind this up. This is the powdered grinded cinnamon, and it smells absolutely gorgeous. But I'm not going to be using it for baking. I'm going to be using it to coat the seeds before we put them into the compost. And these are the seeds with all the flesh removed, and now I'm going to coat them in the cinnamon. So here's the palm seeds in a plastic bag with all the cinnamon. I've just moved it about just to coat the seeds, and now it's time to actually put them in the compost. So now that we've soaked the seeds, it's actually time to put them in something in order to germinate them. And there's various things you can use. You can use moss, or you can use just pure vermiculite or perlite. Some people just use coir, but what I'm going to use is this very fine grade seed and cutting compost, which is low in nutrients, full of lots of air. So it's got vermiculite added to it, and it's very, like I said, fine grade. It will all clog together, which would inhibit germination. And I'm going to use this, but to make it completely sterile, I'm going to put some of this in the microwave and let it cool down to kill any bacteria and viruses that may be present. So that's the compost going in the microwave. And we'll just set the timer and give it a few minutes. And that will sterilise the compost. Take it out, it should be very hot. And then just put a plastic bag over it to stop any germs going in now that you've gone to the trouble of sterilising it. And let that cool down completely before we put the seeds in there. So I've poured the compost that's been sterilised into a fresh plastic bag. I've labelled the bag with the date and what's in the bag, so Juania australis, and today's the 10th of December. And then I've put some boiled water in the bag, just like a handful of drops, just to make sure it's moist, the compost. And it's only slightly moist, it's still really crumbly, it's all not stuck together. And that is because I just want a little bit of moisture, obviously, for the seeds to germinate, but not too much, it will cause rot. And now I've got my seeds here. I'm just going to pick them up and put them into the compost, give the bag a shake, and that's it. It's a waiting game then. The important thing with seeds is making sure that you put them in the right temperature. So with these seeds, they don't want to be too warm. Room temperature, so 15 to 20 degrees is what they want. They don't want to be really over 20 degrees, 25 at max, because they're from a part of the world where they germinate basically at those temperatures. They don't need to be desert hot or anything like that. So they won't need to be in the propagator. So I'm going to put these basically on the top of a cupboard in the kitchen, and I will check on these every sort of week or so, maybe a bit less, just to see if they're sprouted. So now, after exactly 3 months, we've got our first couple of seeds that have actually popped and germinated. It's quite hard to see, but here we have one here, the little creamy blob here on the side of the seed. So it just germinated. Got to check every few days. And that's fantastic news, because these are really rare seeds. And there's no mould. I know it's very hard to see on here, I'm sorry. No mould at all on the seed, because the cinnamon powder that I used. So now the next step is to let these grow on a bit further in the bag before I transport them into different individual modules. So we've got a couple of seeds germinated, waiting for the other 3 to go, and they'll be all left in the bag until they do so. Thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK. As you can see, I've got lots of waste materials now that I've cleared from the rest of the garden, and I've got to think of something I'm going to do with these as the recycling centres close. The recycling bins are not getting collected at the moment, so I'm probably going to have to use this as a mulch or compost it, and use the canes from the old bamboo here in the garden, the structures or something like that. So that's going to keep me busy. Join me next week where I'll be doing more in the garden.